I never thought that I would be a leader. My life didn't change all at once. How do we evaluate success? My faith struggles, and there were three of them, I wish I knew. For the first time in my life, I realized what Jesus was saying.
Greetings to everyone again. Welcome back to our conversations from below with Uncle Bull Taylor and his book Leading from Below. And it is great to have you all online. And today we have a very special guest. And with so many of our guests, it is not just someone who have read the book or who have known Uncle Bull a little bit, but actually someone that's a good friend, someone that I personally have met, 20 odd alongside for a few years, and it's very exciting to have you, Bertil. Good to see you again, and I'm just going to go jump straight into this for the sake of time, and then try to stick to the time limit that we have. Not that we've managed to successfully be obedient to it over the last few sessions, but yeah, today we talk about the triple death, navigating profound loss and grief. And I'm pretty sure that all of us can relate to that in one way or the other. But as a habit, I want to take us quickly to the chapter where I just want to read a short little passage out of it. And then I'm just going to straight over that, hand over to Bertul, that I believe has some key questions to ask. And then we will start engaging in this conversation. So if we go to that specific chapter about the triple death, it reads as follows. How could I have imagined that in the space of 2 years, I would die to Latin America, to the formal teaching, and later to the conviction that I could shepherd a congregation? But that is what happened, the triple death. Bertil, this passage summarizes a period of immense loss for Uncle Bull and in his ministry, and someone who have walked alongside Bull for so many years. Um, what is one of those key questions that comes to mind about his willingness to document this death, and what kind of a question does it raise to you?
Firstly, Adriaan, thanks for inviting me to this conversation. It's really an important book written by Bill, and a lot of things that we need to think through. So it's very good to be with you today and talk about some of the issues that relate to our personal lives and ministries and working together as a team with you, Adriaan, and with Bill for many years. Bill, first, thank you so much for sharing these thoughts, these insights, for your transparency, for your honesty. These are not easy questions, issues. But on page 58, Bill, you describe the moment Yvonne shared her conviction that you were supposed to leave Trinity, to leave TEDS. You write, I collapsed on a kitchen floor, undone, weeping. My dreams were gutted. Quite dramatic, Bill. Can you take us inside the visceral grief of that moment? What was the specific dream that was dying? And why was it death so devastating to your identity as a leader, Bill?
I wish I knew. There are so many questions in that one textured question. Um, I think I go back to Latin America, and the move to Trinity was basically my decision, that it was time to leave Latin America, we were agreed on. At the time that we were deciding that we would leave Latin America permanently, there were two seminaries that had asked me to teach. One was my alma mater, Dallas Theological Seminary. The other was Trinity. And as we got closer to decision time, the Dallas invitation closed down for reasons beyond my control. And I took that as guidance because I that's not really where I wanted to go, because I felt that God was opening me up to a bigger arena of 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 spirituality, of theology, and Trinity was evangelical, but it had a more spacious, not fuzzy walls, but it wasn't a bounded set. So Yvonne agreed because I don't remember her disagreeing. And we had been at Trinity for a year already, an experiment, and then we returned to Latin America for 2 years, but now we would come back permanently. When I came back from class that day, and we were living in a very small efficiency apartment, 2 bedrooms, the 3 children were in 1 bedroom. There were 16, 14, 10. David's bed was a fold up, and he would wake up and fold his bed up so there was room to move. The girls had a bunk bed. But that did not bother us, the smallness. We lived with international students. Our next door neighbor was David Taiwan Lee and Abel and Gerardo of Chad. But Yvonne was operating at a different level of spirituality than I was, a different level of discernment. And we were all grieving the loss of Latin America, but I was plunged into the excitement of teaching and learning and growing and changing and taking classes that other faculty did not want to take because they were required classes, and I love that. But when I came back that day and she said to me, "There's something I need to tell you," that's coded language for "you better sit down, Taylor." But I was standing in the little sort of kitchenette area, and she said, "I don't think Trinity is the place of God's protection and blessing for our children."
Yeah.
And that's when I collapsed. And I said to her, "Why are you doing this to me?" And that was the wrong thing to say. Said, "We're here because of you. But I'm just telling you that I do not sense this is the place that we're supposed to be." I immediately collapsed, but I immediately knew that it was over. But I had no idea what I would do with my life. I knew that I was not supposed to circulate my CV and try to get a job somewhere else. Uh, I was paralyzed. And so I, I, I couldn't understand God. He had he had not only gone silent, but I was mute. And all I could see was desert, and fire, and death.
Yeah, he was certainly talking through the one, don't you think so?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he continues doing that.
Yeah. Uh, I mean, I
I
can. Yeah.
Bert, I think that wasn't the first time I had felt Yvonne's prophetic voice,
Oh, yeah.
but that was a watershed
Mm,
prophetic voice.
mm,
And the only one who understood us was David Howard, who had had a very similar experience in leaving Columbia with four children and moving to that same area of Chicago.
mm,
But he said, Dave said, I made some bad decisions that I don't
mm,
want you to make.
mm, mm.
And then God used him in many ways of wisdom, and then later opening the door to WA.
Yeah. I mean, you described three kinds of death. The more geographical, that was Latin America. I can identify very much with that. I mean, the challenge to leave that region very much, but also the teaching and also, I mean, you were pastoring as well. So there are three dimensions here. Um, was one of them more difficult, more disorienting, or would you say it was this somehow the sum of the three? Um, and I mean, you didn't stop there. There was a time after that, death, but some kind of resurrection came out of that. Could you describe that somehow?
I think leaving Latin America and teaching happened in Latin America. And so that was a process of maybe 8 months. So I could process that process. Um, and and Yvonne was wisdom, and we knew that we were supposed to leave. Leaving the church in Guatemala was more difficult than leaving the seminary. Leaving the seminary was more difficult than leaving the mission agency. To be honest, I was glad we had left the agency. That was on the 31st of August of 1985, and I celebrated that day. I said, boy, and I had to work that one through because I realized that the attitude was not right. I think the culminating blow was after we left Trinity, and we went to the small town in Arkansas, a beautiful area of the country, um, with friends that we thought were our closest friends in America, and a church of about 125 people that I had preached in many, many times. Yvonne had visited, we'd visited every home leave. And I would become the teaching elder there. Um, I wasn't the only teacher because I started traveling with WA. But one day, a Sunday, driving home from church, Yvonne said, "How do you think it went today?" I said, "Well, what do you mean it went? How did you feel in your preaching?" I said, "Well, you know, okay, not necessarily great, but not bad." I said, why are you asking that?" She said, "Well, I think that your words come out of your mouth and they drop to the floor."
Mm.
Is that my fault? No, 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 no. She said, "There is a spirit of opposition to you in the church, and there's an evil spirit." And then things just started unraveling.
Mm,
I had a new deacon accuse me of deception. Um, One of our best friends, whose husband was a lead elder of the church, came to the elders meeting and said, the church is in a crisis. It's never been before. And I was sitting in the meeting. I was taking notes. And she looked at me and she said, and you're the fault.
Hmm.
And so uh, I made a mistake of confessing to sins that I hadn't committed. I was so distraught.
Hmm.
And everything just came unglued. And I said, God, was it not enough that I left Latin America, I left Spanish, I left teaching, I left Trinity? Do you have to do this to me?
Hmm.
And
So,
I think
so
it
what you
was
felt there,
the
Bill,
final
you,
blow.
yeah, you felt a kind of a, maybe you could call it kind of a ministry violence, or a vacuum in terms of ministry. You mentioned David Howard um, before, and the counsel from his side, his insights, his story. Um, um, I mean, to come to that situation as you described it is very difficult, of course, and I think we all have come, maybe not as dramatic as you described it, but to situations where we don't know exactly what God wants, and this silence from God, and looking for guidance somehow. Um, but I guess you had many other offers, but suddenly things started happening here, and you were offered a new job, something
Mm.
broader in terms of international mission, global mission. How was that process? And what was the role of David Howard in that, Bill?
Yeah, Dave met with Yvonne and me a number of times, and then I was meeting with him on, it was a Monday in early '86 at a restaurant, and I looked at my watch, and it was 1:05, and I remember looking at my watch and said, at 1:05 p.m. in this restaurant, I have made the decision that I would leave Trinity. 20 minutes later, Dave says, if you leave Trinity, I want you to come to Singapore this June. And I said, well, what's Singapore? He said, well, it's the General Assembly of World Evangelical Alliance. I said, well, what's that? Well, there are a lot of people there from around the world, and I want you to meet them. Okay, fine. At least I get to travel to Singapore. He said, no, we have no money. That was an early lesson on finances with the Mission Commission. As you know, Bertie, we raised our own money.
That's
Uh,
right.
but Dave had also said, any decision that you take that blesses your family is a decision that God will bless.
Hmm.
And and you can ask any of my children, Christine, David, Stephanie, and they will go back and say, Dad died to Trinity because of us. So when I get to Singapore, and I describe this in the book, I get there late one night, and Dave Howard was waiting for me, and then he said, we're having lunch with Theo Williams tomorrow morning or tomorrow noon. I said, well, okay, fine. And then lunch starts, and Theo Williams says, we want to invite you to take over the Mission Commission. I said, what, what's, what's the Mission Commission? So he tried to explain it, and I took notes. And I still have those notes on that placemat from that hotel. It's one of those documents. I think I revealed it in when we turned over leadership to you, Bertil, and you were there, Adriaan, as a very young man. I think that what happened, and this language came to me this week or last week, that as I sat with Dave and Theo in that restaurant, I still was in a darkness because my life had not turned out the way I thought it would. I didn't understand God. God was silent. I was mute. The world was a desert. But when that invitation came and I understood it, I felt I thought I heard the sound of a stone rolling.
Hmm.
And then it was like a ray of light shone in the cave. And that was the moment that I realized I had been visited by resurrection.
Hmm.
I, I, I haven't said that before that way, other than to my wife.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's when I started to have hope. Now, the desert continued. The failure at the church, apparent failure, because I was there 3.5 years, but it was not until January of 1990 that I went full time with the Mission Commission. But the desert lasted another year
Hmm.
and a half. So it was a long process, but God was in the business of remaking Bill Taylor.
So the first years, Bill, as the director of the Mission Commission, you were still a local pastor.
I was more and more part-time at the church,
Okay.
but the global was giving me life.
Mm.
Now that's also when I made the mistake of being gone too much,
Mm.
and my daughter corrected me,
Mm.
and that's also
Yeah.
in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met you the year after in '87. You were here in Brazil, and we met at Comibam,
Yeah.
the mission conference. I attended one seminar that you had on third culture kids, on MKs, missionary kids, and we both are. So, and then I had the privilege to join the Mission Commission in '92 in Manila, in the Philippines, and there started a journey together all these years. If you look back, Bill, I mean, now we were talking about this resurrection. I still feel that it was more a kind of a process. It wasn't just what, and you were alive in that sense, but it was kind of a process there. Um, uh, what are the insights there, Bill? What can we learn from that? I mean, this transition to a new role. I mean, international role. I can guess if you had the possibility, you would have left the church immediately, because and I know I can identify a lot with that as well. Um, but somehow this death that you describe, this triple death, also this process prepared you for the mission commission and for all these years. You could endure, you can persist, you can continue, and you help many others during this time. What are some of the key lessons there, Bill? Also, when you think about the transition from your leadership to my leadership in 2006, when we met Adriaan, when I met Adriaan first time down there in South Africa.
Well, when I finished the manuscript of this book and I submitted it for publication, it was not accepted, which was a blow. It was too long. I was asked to eliminate 30,000 words. David helped me. He just eliminated chapters. Um, but I realized that God was telling me to put this manuscript on the back part of the stove where heat would still cause change of the substance. And that lasted for a year because I sensed that there was something that God wanted to teach me before the book was to be released or turned in, because at the end of the year, and it was almost, it was about a year, and I discerned three things, Bertil and Adriaan. Number one, we're counting this way. Number one, that the 17 years of ministry in Latin America were preparation for the 30 with WA. Not that the 17 years were secondary, but that's where leadership came to me, and I didn't look for it. I didn't ask for it. I didn't seek it. And I would receive it and then I would turn it back. That's where I made some pretty significant mistakes. And I think I learned from them. Uh, but that's when I look back and I say, well, God visited me with leadership, but I didn't call it that. But those years of of teaching, of discipling, of culture study, of theological transition, of church planting, of evangelism, of discipleship, that was where my vocatio, my calling, was confirmed. That God had called me into a transformational discipleship, and the specific occupation would be different, but overarching. The second is that, as I describe in the book, I grew up unevenly. My my mother never demonstrated affection to me that I remember. I don't remember being hugged or kissed by her. My father was more affectionate. I had to process my mother after she died for about 3 years till I think I finally understood her and her family. Um, I flunked second grade. Well, why did I flunk second grade? Well, did not my parents know that I could speak Spanish, but I couldn't read or write it? And I was put into a Spanish school only, so I flunked. And I don't ever remember my parents talking to me about it other than saying, Billy, you failed second grade, so you'll repeat it. And so my response is, okay. But then I go back and say, why did my parents put me in school when I was 4? And that's because mother in particular was called to ministry. And so my sister and I would ride across the city of San Jose, San Jose, uh, Costa Rica, and we'd take 2 buses. I would sit on her lap. We would save 15 cents. We had candy money. Uh, we went into downtown San Jose and took another bus to would take us. And then that afternoon, 3 or 4 in the afternoon, we would come back. Uh, Costa Rica was very safe at that time. I wouldn't do it now. So when we come to the States, I'm a senior in high school. There was no orientation of what the United States is like, and I talk about that. There's some other stories that are waiting to be told. But what I discerned, Bertil and Adriaan, and this is the second key lesson, is that there was an invisible hand, a hand that was brooding over little Billy
Mm.
and protecting him from the worst. And that protective hand has walked through me all my life.
Yeah.
Mm.
The third thing I
Yeah.
learned is that those deaths and the deconstruction were necessary to the remaking
Yeah.
of Bill Taylor. Spirituality, ambiguity, a different measure of success. So those would be the three lessons:
Yeah.
preparation, the hand, and then the process of undoing me and then redoing.
Yeah. If I listen to you, Uncle Bill, I'm kind of reminded. You'll remember it was 2019, we did that road trip through Botswana, and we talked about liminal space, and you talk about these different stages that you have gone through. And I remember particularly in one conversation on a road trip, which reflects directly to this. You talk about the importance to grieve over your losses. So, if for our viewers specifically, and also for us still today, how important is it that as you go through these stages, and you might have just realized that you've lost a piece of ministry or something that you were really passionate about, and the Lord led you into something else, how important is it for a leader to pause for a few moments and to thoughtfully grieve those losses or those changes that is taking place?
Well, it's imperative if you're going to move into health um, and transformation, because yeah, I've run into people that say God answers all my prayers.
Mm.
Well, you're better off than I am, I guess. But I think that they're self-deceived. We have to grieve loss, and there are so many kinds of losses. I'm 85 years old now, and uh, I know what those losses were. I know what my sins are, um, and I grieve my, it seems to be perpetual weaknesses. Um, but I was thinking that actually I was making a list of people in Scripture that were called at an early moment in time, but they don't come into their calling until much later. Moses, um, Joseph, um, King David, and even Jesus.
Mm.
They're, I mean, maybe he will let us ask him. Did you ever wonder when the Father was going to give you the green light?
Mm.
Yeah.
Or did you know when you're supposed to leave the carpentry shop? Who told you to get baptized? So our Lord doesn't come into that. I mean, he waits until he's 30, and then he only has 3 years to do everything he has to do.
Mm.
And so I'm struck, I'm deeply moved by that passage in Hebrews that says Jesus learned obedience by suffering without sin.
Yeah.
The
Feels.
whole I was thinking about this construction as well. I mean, we can feel it as death, as things we are losing, and it's tough, it's difficult, and we can feel very sorry about that. But at the same time, it is that distractions that give us the possibility to be changed, to be transformed.
Yeah.
When we have the courage, the humility, and the grace from the Lord to leave some things and let Him do something new. You have mentioned several times, Bill, that suddenly you have a new name. There's a new Bill Taylor. And I think that exemplifies somehow what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it's almost.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, it's almost just reminding us that that death is not the end, but it's something that's really needed, because it preludes the resurrection.
Yeah, there is no resurrection without death.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, the renaming, Bertil, the Iguazu consultation,
Yeah.
November of 99. I had no idea that a concept reflected practitioner existed.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Bertil, you were there. You were there. Where did that word come from? Because I left Brazil a reflective practitioner. And it was like
it came from the Lord.
I think so. Okay. Let's just say it came from the Lord, Bertil, because I don't think I've been able to name it because I thought it was you.
I don't think so. I
thought it was
I think a common sense somehow. It was in the air, and that gave birth to it somehow. I don't know who said it for the first time. It may have been you, Bill.
Well, I'm willing to accept that.
Yes,
but with all humility. But I think that was one of those moments where I've been renamed. Yeah.
Well, as always, there's so much more that can be said and to be shared, and I really want to encourage all our viewers that if you really want to get into all of this, you need to make sure that. And if you don't know where to find it, below down in the description, there's a couple of links. Click one of them, follow it, get an ebook, get the hard copy, spend some time, read the stories, and share us your comments or even some of your questions that you might have. Bertil, thank you again so much for your time and your willingness to participate in these conversations. I think, as we said more than once before, there's way more that can be said, and we might even come back to some of these discussions and some of the thoughts as shared. And maybe we will understand later on who said or who first said the words reflective practitioner. I don't know. We will discover that maybe along the way. But yeah, thank you so much. In our next session, we're going to go a little bit further, and we're going to discover or learn a little bit more on how do you find new life after loss, as we will discuss resurrection from the ashes, finding new life in transition. So from our side, thank you for joining us. We look forward to see you in the next session. And until then, from us, goodbye and God bless.